Bonsoir et bienvenue to this episode of Range Woodworking. I suppose you're here to check out this sweet couch side table that I made. So settle in, enjoy. I'm going to go back to mon français. Get comfy. Oh, good girl.
So as with any of my videos, the first step is to select my timber and mill it down. I'll use my best tongue out concentration face to select the perfect board. And I'm using Tasmanian oak for this table, and fortunately I can build the whole thing out of a single board. A long board, but a single board. Once the faces are tidied up, I cut my board into two more manageable pieces using my crosscut sled and set the, easy does it. I set my stop block up for the base and the top pieces. And for those that struggle to imagine how things come together, here's a very rough approximation. And nailed it. Now, because I don't have a jointer, I need to put a straight edge on these. Fortunately, the boards came pretty straight from the timber yard, so I'll just identify a straight side and mark it to run against the fence. I'll use this Freud glue line rip blade to rip the board straight, and I've recently decided I need to take the time to change my blades out to suit the cut they're doing. I'd been in the habit of just using my combination blade for everything, when, as you can see here, it literally takes just over a minute to change, including dropping the bolt in the saw and fishing it out. Once the rip blade is installed, I bring the fence over to just shave a smidge off the one side, and then repeat for the other side. Using these sweet little glue up supports, I'll make the panels for the top, bottom and side of the table. After applying the glue and before clamping, I use these cawls to align the boards because they won't fit in my thicknesser after they're glued together. And whilst I've been making new good habits, I take the time to use a sheet of baking paper to help prevent the glue from staining my clamps and my clamps from staining my glue ups. And once they're all clamped up, I'll put them aside to think about what they've done. After an hour or so, I use my best TikTok editing to shake off the cawls, and then I'll scrape away all the excess glue squeeze out before clamping them back together to finish curing.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
And a little longer than a few minutes later, I'll take them all out of the clamps, and it's time for some initial sanding. Normally in my videos I just breeze over this because it's sanding and no one likes it, but I will take a minute to just quickly talk about the steps I take to keep everything nice and flat and avoid any scratches or pigtails showing through in the finish. I mark every face with a pencil before sanding across the grain, and then with the grain. And I just let the weight of the sander do the work, just guiding it along. I could even do a subpar job using only one finger. When I finish with a single grit, I go over to my air compressor and blow all the dust and grit off before starting again with the next grit. Once I've gone through those stages with 80 and 120 grit, I quickly buzz each end at the table saw to flush up the ends and cut the pieces to their final size. Then things get pretty special.
Okay, so this rickety jig is my box joint jig. Just designed to sit in the vise, get tightened up, it's nice and stable. It has a carriage that slides back and forth for repeatable cuts. It's an awesome jig. Once you make it, you don't have to adjust anything other than the height of the router bit. I made it from David Picciuto's Make Something YouTube channel. I'll make sure I link that in the description below.
Thanks, Dan. Now, first step is to set the height of the router bit to just a hair thicker than the material. You can see me use a small steel rule here just to confirm the height. For the first cut, I clamp the piece in place because I like to be cautious. You could probably do this with every cut if you really wanted to, but to be honest, I don't have the patience. And apologies for the poor angle, but this makes a huge mess if you don't have a dust extraction jerry-rigged to catch it all. So I slowly advance the carriage, allowing the router bit to cut the groove, then pop it off, move it over, and sit the groove on the registration pin. Then I simply rinse and repeat until all finished up. It's easy to get all turned around doing box joints, so I take the time to lay out my pieces and then mark where I need to cut out. For those pieces that have the first groove at the very edge, I clamp one of the other pieces onto the registration pin and then butt the piece up to it. From there, we just do more of the same. I'm sure you get it by now. A quick little dry fit, hopefully improved from the last one. Oof, nearly lost it. Now, I don't like that the end groove is a different width to all the others, so I head back to the table saw and just rip it off. Ooh, backwards. Now I'll quickly sand the inside faces to the final 180 grit, as these will be difficult to reach once everything's glued together. Now it can be really hard to keep a three-sided shaped square during a glue up, so I cheat. I measure what the inside length of the table will be and head over to my timber pile. Lo and behold, I find two pieces the perfect length. And now I'll embark on one of the more chaotic glue-ups in recent memory. And I'll take this opportunity to recommend you make a plan before gluing up. Box joints suck to glue up, they're snug beforehand, and then a water-based glue like Titebond Original swells the joints so they get even tighter. Enter the rubber mallet. And then you start using clamps to try pull the joints closed, when the voice in your head keeps reminding you that Titebond Original has a 10-minute open time that is rapidly approaching. And then the mallet gets more involved, briefly reminding you that the pointer finger on your left hand is a bit close for comfort. And that's enough chaos. I can't watch anymore. We'll skip ahead to the next day when everything is tidy and organised. I'll remove this painter tape I put along the join to help catch any glue squeeze out. Or at least I'll try to. Oh, come on. And it's time to sand the joints nice and flush, and then inspect the damage from the glue up carnage. Okay, not ideal, a bit gappy, but we can do something about that. I start by mashing some glue into the gaps and just using my finger to help it tack up a bit. Then I'll apply a ridiculous grimace to sand some sawdust into the gaps. And there you have it. Once the finish is on, you'd never know the gaps were there. But before we get carried away with finishing, I'll throw a small round over on all the edges. Oh, I'll fill that gap too. And then I take a sharp chisel to continue the round over to the corners where the router couldn't reach. And finally, finish. I'm using Rubio Monocoat in Pure because I really like this finish. It's nice, it's hard wearing, it gives the timber a great character, and it's just really easy to apply. I simply massage it in for 10 minutes or so with a white Scotch-Brite pad, and then I wipe off the excess with a clean cloth. And then I give it a quick buff with a microfiber cloth and leave it to dry for 24 hours. And that'll do it. A relatively quick, relatively simple, but really eye-catching side table for the couch. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time, take it easy.